The dog was dying in the back of a pickup truck, and Sienna Ward had about 45 seconds to decide what to do about it. She was standing at the ambulance bay door with a patient chart tucked under her arm when the headlights swung into the ER entrance. The truck came in too fast and braked hard, rear wheels skidding on wet asphalt, and before the engine was even off, the driver's door flew open and a man in a dirt-streaked army uniform was already sprinting toward her through the rain. "Please," that was all he said. Just that one word, with the full weight of a man who had used that word maybe twice in his entire adult life. Sienna looked past him into the truck bed. A large German shepherd lay on a military green blanket, flanks heaving in short, shallow bursts. He was wearing a tactical vest, a blood-soaked field dressing wrapped around his left hindquarter. Even from 10 feet away in the parking lot light, she could see the color of his gums when he panted. Pale, nearly white, the color she'd been trained to recognize and trained never to ignore. Hemorrhagic shock, possible internal bleeding, pulse almost certainly already compromised. Sienna handed the chart to Lupi, who had materialized at her elbow, and walked toward the truck. "What happened?" she asked, pressing 2 fingers against the dog's femoral artery. The pulse was there but thready, like a phone signal at the very edge of range, present but barely. "Training drill," the soldier said. His name tape read Tully. His hands were shaking in a way he was clearly trying to control. Vehicle rollover, a panel sheared loose. "We were 45 minutes from the nearest veterinary center. He's been like this for 22 minutes already. I didn't know." He stopped. Swallowed. "I didn't know where else to go." "Okay," Sienna said. She straightened and looked at him. "Let's get him inside." Tully looked at her the way people look when they've braced themselves for no and receive yes instead, like the entire structure of the moment they prepared for has collapsed and they're not sure what to stand on. "You're sure." "I'm the charge nurse tonight," she said. "Let's move." His name was Flint. Sergeant Ray Tully had worked with him for 4 years, and he told Sienna this while she was cutting away the field dressing in Bay 3. Speaking in the low, continuous way of someone who needs to keep their mouth moving, because stopping might mean something they can't afford to feel yet. 4 years. 3 overseas rotations, 2 with SOCOM-attached units and environments, Tully described only as austere. Flint had found an IED cache in Kandahar province in 2019 that the intelligence analysts had missed entirely. He'd been awarded a service commendation and a unit citation. He'd been cleared for duty 11 days. After a shrapnel injury that most dogs would have retired on. He liked freeze-dried beef liver treats and had a complicated relationship with garden hoses. Something about the sound of the water, Tully said, which was funny because nothing else on earth rattled him. Sienna listened while she worked. The injury was a deep laceration from the sheared vehicle panel. It had cut through muscle and nicked what she suspected was the femoral artery. Barely, just enough to cause slow and serious internal bleeding without the external catastrophe that would have been obvious from the start. She couldn't perform surgery. She wasn't a veterinarian, and Bay 3 was not an operating theater. But she had 12 years of trauma nursing behind her. She had Dr. Mulvaney on call, a physician who had done 2 years in emergency veterinary care before medical school, and she had a dog who still had a pulse. She worked. She focused. The room narrowed to the space in front of her hands the way it always did when the situation was serious enough to push everything else to the periphery. She was 20 minutes in when she heard the heels. They were a particular kind of heels. The kind worn by someone with institutional authority, walking fast through a hospital hallway late at night, and the rhythm of them, measured, deliberate, not quite running but close, was a sound that every nurse eventually learns to read before the person wearing them appears. Phyllis Dunbar appeared in the doorway of Bay 3 at 11:47 p.m. She was the hospital's chief operating officer, 53, reading glasses on a beaded chain, the kind of administrator who had worked for 30 years to develop the skill of appearing completely unmoved by whatever she was looking at. She was very good at it. Sienna had seen her unmoved by budget shortfalls, by staffing crises, by a board member's public meltdown at a quarterly meeting. She was unmoved now, technically. But something behind her eyes had gone very still in the specific way of a person doing rapid and private calculations. Nurse Ward, her voice was quiet. What is that? It wasn't a question. Military working dog, Sienna said, not looking up. 4 years of service, 3 overseas rotations. He's in hemorrhagic shock from a vehicle accident. I'm stabilizing him. This is a human hospital. I'm aware. You are using medical resources in Bay 3 to treat an animal. I am. The silence that followed lasted about 5 seconds. Sienna kept her hands moving. Stop what you're doing, Dunbar said. Sienna looked up then. She met Dunbar's eyes across the room. If I stop what I'm doing, this dog dies. Then the dog dies. That is not our facility's jurisdiction, and it is not yours. You are creating a liability exposure that I am not willing to absorb. Dunbar's voice didn't rise. It never rose. It got precise instead, colder and more specific, like something being turned down to its lowest setting. Step away from the animal. Behind Dunbar, in the hallway, Sienna could see Loopy and the young aide Brandon standing very still. Beyond them, Tully, still in the doorway, being held back by protocol and by something that looked like barely held together restraint. I need 2 more minutes, Sienna said. You need to step back now. He is a decorated service animal with a confirmed record of detecting explosive devices in active combat zones, and his handler drove 45 minutes through the rain to get him here because he had no other option. And that, Dunbar said, is not a consideration that changes our legal position or yours. Step back. Flint made a sound then, not a whimper, something smaller than that. A working dog trained against vocalizing pain, trained to stay quiet on mission no matter what, making a small involuntary sound anyway. It was possibly the most heartbreaking thing Sienna had ever heard in 12 years of emergency nursing, and she had heard a great many heartbreaking things. She finished the compression. She placed both hands flat on the instrument tray and held them there for a moment, very still. Then she stepped back. Tully moved past Dunbar immediately and dropped to his knees on the floor beside Flint. The dog's tail moved, 2 or 3 inches, barely visible, but it moved. Dunbar watched this for a moment with the expression of someone categorizing a problem that has been, if not resolved, at least reclassified. Security will escort you out, she said to Sienna. Her voice was back to its standard operating temperature. Your access badge will be deactivated immediately. You are terminated, effective tonight, for gross violation of hospital policy, unauthorized use of medical resources, and conduct that exposes this facility to serious legal liability. The words settled into the room like something physical. Sienna heard Lupe make a small sound behind Dunbar. Brandon looked at the floor. You're firing me, Sienna said, right now, tonight. Your conduct tonight constitutes a serious breach of. I have worked here for 4 years. Sienna's voice was very steady. She was surprised by how steady it was, given that her hands had gone cold. I have not taken a sick day in 2 years. I covered 17 extra shifts this fiscal year. I have never been written up. I have never received a formal complaint. None of that changes. I know it doesn't. Sienna untied the lanyard from around her neck and set her badge down on the instrument tray. It made a small plastic sound against the metal. I'll need a few minutes to collect my things from my locker. Dunbar didn't say anything else. Sienna changed in the staff locker room. She put on her jeans and her gray pullover, the clothes she'd arrived in 11 hours ago. She picked up her purse, her keys, the small crocheted bag of throat lozenges she kept at the back of her locker that she had apparently never once used. She looked at her reflection in the metal locker door, distorted and dim, barely a face, and she thought about all the practical things she'd need to do. File for unemployment, call an attorney, figure out health insurance. The security guard who walked her out was named Hank. He was young, and he looked absolutely miserable about the assignment, and he didn't say a single word to her the whole length of the corridor, through the sliding doors, across the ambulance bay. She was grateful for that. It was 38 degrees outside. She had left her coat in her car. She sat in the parking lot for a while before she could make herself drive. She wasn't crying. It was more like her body trying to recalibrate, the way a compass needle swings before it settles, looking for north in a landscape that had just shifted. She went home, she fed her cat, she did not sleep. In the morning, she called the Veterans Affairs office because she didn't know who else to call, and the woman who answered was kind, but had no real guidance to offer. She called an employment attorney, whose receptionist told her the earliest consultation was in 3 weeks. She went to the grocery store because she needed to keep her body doing something that resembled a normal day. She came home to 2 missed calls from an unfamiliar number. She called it back. The man on the other end identified himself as Colonel James Forsyth, United States Army Special Operations Command. His voice was measured and unhurried, the voice of someone who had learned long ago that urgency and composure are not opposites. "Is this Sienna Ward?" he asked. "Yes. You treated Flint 2 nights ago at Mercy Regional." "I did." A pause. "He's alive," Forsyth said. "Sergeant Tully got him to the surgical center before midnight. They operated. He's going to make a full recovery." Sienna stood in her kitchen with her hand pressed flat against the counter and did not say anything for a moment, because something in her chest had loosened all at once, the way a knot releases when you find the right thread. "Mrs. Ward," Forsyth said, "I understand you were terminated for what you did that night." "Yes." "I'd like to come speak with you, and with your former employer." He paused. "If you're open to that." Her first instinct, the one she'd been following her whole professional life, said, "Don't make it a thing. Handle it quietly. Don't draw attention to yourself. Don't be the woman who makes a scene." She looked at her cat, who was watching her from the kitchen table with the calm, evaluating gaze of an animal that has no patience for her quieter instincts. "When?" she said. Forsyth arrived at Mercy Regional at 10 o'clock the following morning, and he did not arrive alone. He came with 2 members of his command staff, a public affairs officer, and 4 soldiers from Tully's unit who had specifically requested to be present, and Tully himself in dress uniform, and Flint walking at his left side on a short lead, moving slowly but moving, a fresh bandage on his hindquarter, his head up, his ears forward, his attention alert in the way of an animal that understood something significant was happening and had chosen to show up for it. Sienna was in the lobby. She hadn't been formally invited. She had come anyway. The administrative staff hadn't known to prepare for this. The front desk called back to Dunbar's office within 60 seconds of the group clearing the entrance, and Dunbar appeared from the corridor before Forsyth's group had made it 10 feet past the door. Glasses up, expression composed, the way she always was. She took in the uniforms, the dog, Sienna Ward standing off to the side in her own clothes, without a badge, without a lanyard. "Colonel," her voice was steady, "I wasn't notified of a meeting." "No," Forsyth agreed pleasantly, "you weren't." He didn't need volume. He had the kind of bearing that functions as its own gravity, the room oriented toward him without being asked to. He spoke at a conversational level, and everyone in the lobby, the waiting room visitors and the receptionist and the staff passing through, went quiet to hear it. He said, "Flint is a certified explosive detection asset with a confirmed record that includes 9 IED caches and 2 vehicle-borne explosive devices in active combat zones. He received a unit citation and a service commendation. He was treated here 2 nights ago by one of your nurses, at significant personal risk to her career because she made a judgment call that a life in front of her was worth saving." He looked at Dunbar with something that was not unfriendly and was not warm, and she was terminated for it. Dunbar said, "With respect, Colonel, the policy question." "This hospital," Forsyth said, "is 6 miles from an active installation. The personnel from that installation and their families represent a substantial portion of your patient base. The Army takes careful note of which civilian partners demonstrate genuine care for those connected to military service." A pause. "And which ones don't?" The lobby had gone fully silent. Someone coughed in the waiting area, and the sound was too loud. Dunbar looked at Forsyth for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll need to speak with legal." "Of course," Forsyth said. "We'll wait." It took 40 minutes. Sienna sat in the lobby the entire time, and Tully sat beside her, Flint's chin resting on his knee. One of the soldiers from Tully's unit, a young specialist named Yarbrough, who couldn't have been more than 22, disappeared for 10 minutes and returned with bad vending machine coffee for everyone, distributed without comment, and Sienna thought that might have been the single kindest thing anyone had done for her in the past 3 days. When Dunbar's assistant emerged, she read from a prepared statement in the measured tone of someone who had rehearsed it twice. Mercy Regional would reinstate Sienna Ward, effective immediately, with benefits intact. An internal review of the circumstances surrounding the termination would be conducted within 30 days. The hospital's board had agreed to convene a special session to consider formalizing an emergency assistance protocol for military working dogs presenting at the facility. Dunbar herself did not come back out. Sienna stood up. She stood in the lobby of the hospital she had been walked out of at midnight in the freezing rain, and she breathed, once, the long kind of breath that feels like setting something down. Tully was standing beside her. Flint was beside Tully, watching Sienna with the clear, patient attention of a working dog deciding whether a situation still requires him. "Thank you," she said to Forsyth. It felt too small. She said it again anyway. "Thank you." He shook his head. "You made a call at midnight with nothing to back you up and nothing to gain," he said. "We just corrected the ledger." She went back to work 2 days later. Thursday, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., same as always. Loopy hugged her at the nurse's station without saying anything. Brandon shook her hand with both of his, so earnestly that she had to look at the whiteboard to keep from tearing up. "Doctor," Mulvaney left a coffee on her desk with a note that said "only back where you belong," which was not a particularly eloquent sentiment, but was exactly the right one. On her way in, she passed the administrative wing. Phyllis Dunbar's office was dark. There was a temporary nameplate on the door, the kind used for interim appointments when a position is under review. Someone had left a paper coffee cup in the hallway outside, abandoned there, forgotten. It sat uncollected in the particular way of things when no one is certain whose responsibility they are anymore. Sienna looked at it for a moment. Then she kept walking. She had a full rack of patients, a charge log to update, a night shift that wasn't going to run itself. She had, as it turned out, exactly the job she'd had before, and she intended to do it the exact same way.